She's just a kid. What the hell is she doing here, alone?" The auctioneer didn't even try to whisper. His voice echoed across the warehouse, gritty with disbelief. Around him, men in uniforms, trainers, and government agents froze for a moment, all eyes locked onto the girl who had just walked through the rusted steel doors. She couldn't have been more than 12. Her hands trembled, but her jaw was set. She wore a plain gray hoodie, boots soaked from the rain, and clutched a folded piece of paper like her life depended on it. "Her name's Leah Monroe," someone said quietly from the back. "She's the daughter of that officer who died last year. Jacob Monroe. Remember?" That changed everything. The tension in the room dropped an octave. A few people shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how silent it had gotten. Even the dogs, caged and lined up like forgotten soldiers, stopped barking. One of them, a large sable German shepherd with eyes like burning coal, pressed forward in his cage. His ears twitched toward the girl. Leah didn't flinch as she passed men who towered over her. Her eyes were locked on the row of kennels at the far end. Each cage held a discarded canine, stripped of purpose, waiting to be auctioned like scrap. Some growled, some whimpered. But the one at the end, he didn't make a sound. He just stared. And when Leah stopped in front of his cage, he stood slowly, like he already knew her. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Kid, this isn't a place for you. Come back with a parent." Leah didn't speak. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded document, handing it to him. At the top, Officer Jacob Monroe, line of duty death certificate. She unfolded another paper, hand-signed by the department chaplain. The auctioneer squinted, read it once, then exhaled slowly through his nose. "You're here for him, aren't you?" he asked, nodding toward cage 19. "Ranger." Leah nodded, her voice steady. "He was my dad's partner. He's not a thing you can sell." But according to state law, he was. After Jacob's death, Ranger had been retired and deemed unsuitable for reassignment, too aggressive, too unpredictable, too attached to his fallen handler. Like dozens of other canines with nowhere to go, he ended up here, at the state auction. Ranger stood completely still inside the cage, not barking, not whining, just watching her, like he remembered every step of the way home. The scar on his shoulder twitched when she reached out, her fingers brushing the bars. The auctioneer's voice softened, but his tone remained firm. "Sweetheart, there's a list of bidders a mile long. Government contracts, security firms, private—" "I brought the money," she cut him off. From her backpack, she pulled out a worn envelope, thick with carefully stacked bills. Her fingers trembled slightly as she handed it over. "That's everything I've got. It's enough." Silence again. Some men scoffed, others looked away. But one grizzled handler stepped forward, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You really think a kid like you can handle him?" he challenged. "He bit 3 officers in training after your dad died, nearly tore through a chain leash." Leah didn't blink. He didn't go crazy. He was grieving. The handler tilted his head, studying her, trying to decide if this was bravery or something far more dangerous, something like love. Behind her, Ranger let out a sound, not a growl, a whine, the kind a dog makes when they recognize a voice that shouldn't exist anymore. No one moved to stop her. No one stepped forward to block the sale. Maybe they didn't have the heart. Maybe they didn't want to be the ones to tell a fallen officer's daughter that her father's partner didn't belong to her anymore. The auctioneer sighed and said the words she'd never dared to hope for. Cage 19, sold. But the second he reached for the keys, something exploded. Not literally, emotionally, viscerally. Ranger slammed his weight into the cage door with such force the bolts groaned. One more hit, and he would have broken free. Men reached for their tasers. "Don't!" Leah screamed, throwing herself between them. "He's not attacking. He's trying to get to me." Ranger froze, sitting still, tail stiff, eyes locked on Leah. And in that second, the whole room saw it. This wasn't just a dog. This wasn't a sale. It was a reunion, one that had waited through nightmares and silence. Ranger had recognized her, and he wasn't going to let her walk out alone. Not again, not ever. The keys trembled in the auctioneer's hand. He hesitated at the lock like the weight of this moment was more than he could carry. Handlers who once approached Ranger with muzzles and leather gloves stood back, their expressions unreadable. The air in the warehouse had changed. It didn't smell like damp concrete anymore. It smelled like the past catching fire. Laya stood frozen, her heart pounding like a warning drum. A memory surged. 3 months ago, her last glimpse of Ranger, howling behind her father's casket, crying like only a dog who understands death can cry. That sound had haunted her sleep ever since. Now he was silent, but watching her, the same way her father once did, like she was the only person left who mattered. Click. The lock turned. "Back away," the auctioneer muttered. "Careful." Laya ignored him. She stepped forward. "Laya, don't," someone whispered. Maybe the handler, maybe her own fear. But she kept moving. "I'm not scared of him." Ranger tilted his head. She knelt slowly, hands pressed to the cold concrete. "You remember me, don't you?" she whispered. A beat, then another. Ranger stepped forward, just one step. The light caught the scar across his shoulder, where a bullet had grazed him on the last mission he ever ran with her father. Laya reached out, hand open, not demanding, just waiting. Ranger sniffed it, then, like time folded inward, he pressed his snout into her palm. The silence broke like glass. Handlers who had seen him lash out now stared wide-eyed as the massive dog collapsed into her arms, not to attack, but to bury his head against her chest. His entire body trembled. Laya threaded her fingers through his fur the way she had as a toddler on her father's lap. Same smell, same weight. Her tears came fast, but she didn't hide them. "I missed you," she whispered. "He's gone, but I'm still here. I promise I'm still here." Somewhere, quietly, someone began clapping, then another. Not celebration, not applause. It was reverent, shell-shocked. The auctioneer cleared his throat. This covers the adoption fee," he murmured, staring at the envelope. "We'll take care of the rest." Ranger didn't lift his head. He stayed against her like he was afraid she'd disappear again. Laya didn't move, not until her heartbeat settled. Then, boots, slow, heavy. A figure appeared at the side entrance. Ranger perked up, then flattened his ears. A tall man in a long black coat stepped in. He flashed a government ID. No smile. His eyes were cold, his voice colder. "Is this the Monroe girl?" The room froze again. He didn't wait for a response, walked straight toward her. Knelt, eye level with Ranger. The dog growled. Laya gripped his collar. The man didn't flinch. "Special Agent Harrow," he introduced, smooth as oil. "I need to speak with you about your father's last assignment." The handlers exchanged uneasy glances. "What do you mean?" Laya asked, her voice small. Harrow handed her a folder, the edges stamped in red. Classified. Debrief required. "Your father didn't die in a car accident," Harrow said quietly. "That's what they told you, but it was a field op gone wrong, and Ranger wasn't just his partner. He was the only surviving witness." Laya's grip tightened. "They said it was a robbery," she whispered. "That was a lie," Harrow replied. "Your father was chasing something bigger, and someone didn't want him to come back." Laya's blood ran cold. Ranger barked, a sharp sound directed toward the exit. Laya turned. The side door creaked shut. Someone had been watching. Agent Harrow snapped the folder shut. "You'll want to read this," he said, "and stay close to Ranger. He's not just your dog anymore." He looked her straight in the eye. "He might be the only one who can keep you alive." The glass barely cracked, then it shattered. Laya ducked instinctively as shards sprayed across the room. Harrow moved fast, drawing a concealed weapon and pulling her behind the sofa. Ranger launched toward the broken window with a snarl so violent it echoed off the walls. A shadow moved outside. Then another. Whoever they were, they hadn't fired yet. But the threat was real. This wasn't surveillance anymore. They were being hunted. Harrow shoved a burner phone into Laya's hand. "Take the back exit. Ranger will go with you. Run due west through the trail behind the cabin. There's an old ranger station. Go, now." "What about you?" she cried. "I'll hold them off. You're the key now. That dog knows more than anyone left alive. Ranger was already at the back door, growling deep in his chest, tail stiff like a rod. Laya hesitated only for a second, then sprinted after him. The cold air bit into her lungs as they burst outside. Trees rose tall and dark around them. The trail ahead was narrow and scattered with leaves. She ran hard, heart pounding, lungs burning, but she didn't look back. Ranger stayed just ahead, checking the path, pausing only to make sure she was still with him. Gunshots echoed in the distance. One, then another, then silence. Laya felt tears sting her eyes, but she didn't stop. She couldn't, not until she understood what her father had died protecting, and why Ranger was the only one left who could reveal it. Because this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what came next. The ranger station loomed through the trees like a forgotten relic, its windows clouded with dust, its roof sagging from years of neglect. Laya stumbled toward it, legs aching, chest heaving. Ranger had already sprinted ahead, nosing the door and circling the perimeter, ensuring it was safe. When she finally reached him, she collapsed against the frame, struggling to catch her breath. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the creaking door. Inside, the air was musty, thick with pine, mold, and dust that swirled in the fading light. It was empty. No signs of recent use, but solid enough to hide in for now. Ranger followed close behind, then doubled back and shut the door with his body weight. He paced once, twice, then sat in front of her, eyes alert, tail still. His breathing was controlled. He had switched from companion to soldier. Laya couldn't stop shaking. The gunshots still echoed in her memory, each one a question she didn't want to answer. Had Agent Harrow survived? Or had she just left another man to die? She pulled the folder from her backpack and sat on the floor with it. The pages were smudged now, damp from sweat and rain. Ranger walked over and gently rested his head on her knee. She looked down at him, and for the first time since the escape, let her tears fall freely. "What did they do to him?" she whispered. "What did they do to you?" Ranger didn't move, but his eyes flicked toward the window. Laya followed his gaze. Nothing, only trees and mist. But something inside her tightened. They weren't safe yet. They had run, but whoever was after them hadn't stopped. She opened the folder again, scanning for something, anything, that could explain why her father had died, and why Ranger was the target now. Near the back, tucked between surveillance reports and sealed transcripts, she found a photograph. It was old, grainy, but clear enough. Her father stood beside 3 other men, none of whom were identified. Behind them, barely visible, were dogs, canines, big, strong, all German shepherds, all wearing the same patch on their vests, a black triangle with a single red eye in the center. Ranger barked once, sharply. Laya looked up. "You know this, don't you?" He pawed the edge of the photo, then turned and walked toward the far wall where an old supply cabinet stood. He sniffed it, then barked again, louder. Laya followed, unsure what she was expecting. Inside, the cabinet was a mess. Expired first aid kits, emergency flares, broken radio parts. But behind one of the panels, something rattled. She reached in and pulled out a plastic container sealed with duct tape. Inside were photographs, flash drives, and something that made her blood run cold. A worn ID badge. Officer Jacob Monroe. Her dad. Ranger sat beside her as she opened the container. The flash drives were labeled in her father's handwriting. One read, "Project Umbra, do not open without me." The other simply said, "Riggs." Before she could question it, her phone buzzed. The burner. The screen flashed once. Then again. A single message appeared. No number. Just 4 words. "He's not dead. Run." Laya stared at the screen. Her mouth went dry. She didn't know if it was Harrow. She didn't know if it was a trap. But Ranger growled, low and deep, rising to his feet, staring toward the back window. She looked, just in time to see a flicker of motion. Someone was out there. Close. Too close. She grabbed the container, shoved the folder into her backpack, and whispered, "Ranger, go." He didn't need to be told twice. He bolted for the back door, shouldering it open, clearing the path. Laya followed, lungs screaming, adrenaline giving her legs just enough power to keep going. This time, they didn't use the trail. They veered off, deeper into the woods, into rough terrain. Twigs snapped, leaves scattered. But Ranger moved with purpose, leading her through thick brush and low fog. Then the world changed. A low hum filled the air, subtle at first, then louder, like the drone of a machine. Ranger skidded to a stop, blocking her with his body. Just ahead, hidden in the trees, was a clearing, and in the center of it sat a black vehicle, too sleek for the forest. Tinted windows, no license plate. Laya crouched behind a fallen log, clutching Ranger's fur. The hum grew louder. Suddenly, a door opened. A figure stepped out, tall, clean-cut, wearing the same leather jacket from the surveillance photo. Danton Riggs. Laya's heart stopped. He looked around like he already knew they were there. Then calmly, he reached into his coat and pulled out something that made her stomach twist. A dog whistle. He blew into it. No sound. But Ranger snapped his head toward it instantly. His body trembled. "No," Laya whispered, grabbing his collar. "Don't! Stay with me!" Ranger's eyes darted, conflicted. Pain flickered across his face. Then he let out a high-pitched whine and backed up, torn between her voice and some invisible force pulling at him. She held tighter, tears forming. "Please, you're not his anymore." Footsteps. Riggs was walking into the clearing, calm and slow. Ranger growled, low, guttural, then turned, positioning himself between Laya and the man, like a wall of muscle and loyalty. Riggs paused, voice cutting through the mist. "That dog was never your father's, and he sure as hell isn't yours. He was mine before either of you knew his name." Laya stood slowly, her voice steady, even as her knees shook. "Then why is he standing with me now?" Riggs smirked. "Because he hasn't remembered yet." Then he lifted the whistle again. The soundless tone hit like a thunderclap. Ranger staggered back, legs locking, eyes wide and disoriented. Laya grabbed his fur, desperate to anchor him. He whimpered and twisted, caught in a mental tug-of-war she couldn't see. Riggs stepped closer, cold confidence in every move. "You have no idea what he was trained to do. Your father thought he could break the program, but he was wrong. Loyalty isn't earned, it's engineered." Ranger let out a confused bark, not aggressive, but pained. His body trembled violently. Laya crouched, cupped his face in her hands. "Ranger, look at me. You know me. You know who I am. You protected me when no one else would. That wasn't programming. That was you. That was real." For a heartbeat, the forest held still. Then Ranger snarled and spun toward Riggs, not in submission, not in confusion, but with raw, boiling fury. He lunged. Riggs reached for something in his coat, a stun baton maybe, but it was too late. Ranger slammed into him with bone-shattering force, knocking him to the ground. The whistle flew from Riggs's hand, landing in the leaves. Laya didn't hesitate. She ran, picked it up, and crushed it beneath her boot. The plastic splintered. The circuitry snapped like dry twigs. Riggs struggled beneath Ranger, but the dog pinned him, growling so deep it shook the trees. Laya stepped forward. "Call off your men. I know you're not alone." Riggs laughed, blood at the corner of his mouth. "You really think I need backup to deal with a scared little girl and a broken dog?" "I think," she said slowly, pulling the second flash drive from her backpack, "you should be a lot more worried about what's on this than your backup plan." He froze. Confidence wavered. "You know what's on it, don't you?" she continued. "Files, names, dates, what you did to those dogs, what you tried to do to my dad, to Ranger, everything." "You're bluffing," he hissed. "No," she said, eyes narrowing. "I'm finishing what my father started." For the first time, Laya understood. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about legacy. Her father hadn't died trying to escape a mistake. He died protecting something, someone, who was never supposed to survive. Ranger wasn't a failed weapon. He was a witness, a survivor. And now, he was hers. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Riggs heard them too. "You brought the feds?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Ranger finally stepped off his chest and returned to her side. The growl faded. His breathing steadied. As she reached down and stroked his head, he leaned into her hand, like he had the first time they reunited. Helicopter blades cut through the canopy above. Wind kicked up leaves and dust. Agents spilled into the clearing, tactical gear, unmarked coats. One approached Laya directly, lifting his helmet. Agent Harrow. She blinked. "You're alive." "Barely," he muttered, glancing at Ranger. "But looks like the two of you finished the job." They took Riggs into custody without resistance. He didn't speak another word, but the glare he threw at Laya said everything. She had beaten him, not with force, with truth. A few hours later, in a quiet corner of a federal safe house, Laya sat beside Ranger on a worn leather couch. Harrow entered with 2 mugs of cocoa, one for her, one untouched for himself. "The flash drives are secure," he said, sitting beside her. "We've identified half the names already. It'll take time to clean this mess, but your father gave us what we needed. You gave us the rest." She didn't speak at first, just ran her fingers through Ranger's fur, watching the fire crackle. "Can I keep him?" she finally asked. Harrow smiled. "A real one this time. No one's ever going to separate you two again. As far as I'm concerned, he's already home." Laya looked down at Ranger, and for the first time since her father's death, her heart didn't feel like it was breaking. It felt like it was healing, not all at once, but piece by piece. Ranger shifted, resting his head on her knee with a sigh that sounded like peace. She smiled through tired tears. "We made it, boy." Outside, the sky began to lighten, not quite morning, but close. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like they were running anymore. They were exactly where they were meant to be. If this tale moved you, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more thrilling, emotional, and inspiring stories your way. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Do you believe dogs have an extraordinary sixth sense? Share your thoughts and personal stories with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.